Good afternoon, everybody. Happy New Year to all of you. And thank you very much for taking time out. If you're in the UK, then you're taking time out at lunchtime. So we appreciate that. For those of you I haven't met, my name is Amy Nelson-Bennett. I'm the CEO of Positive Luxury. I have a long career in, I guess, what you would call business transformation and turnaround. And prior to, ooh, hold on. Any idea? Okay, sorry, technical issue, but hopefully that is still okay. Prior to joining Positive Luxury in 2021, I spent about 15 years actually working within the luxury industry at the helm of beauty and fragrance brands. Experience that helped me ensure that the work we do with our community of 200 amazing businesses is ambitious, but also I would like to think commercial and pragmatic, which is critically important in these kind of times. Today is our first briefing of the year in advance of tomorrow's publication of Real Change in 2025, What Matters for Sustainable Luxury. This briefing maps out the real changes delivered by the members of the Positive Luxury community in 2024. And a huge thank you to all those businesses who kept sustainability on their corporate priority lists and continue to make positive progress. The report also maps out what's most important for businesses in 2025 for the luxury industry specifically, but also for each of the 6 sectors that we have the great fortune of supporting. The link to the report is going to be posted in the chat now, so you can have an advanced preview. You can also post any questions that come up during this discussion into the chat or the Q&A section. We've got time scheduled at the end to cover those. And our hope is to give everyone a break before they go back to work an hour or 56 minutes from now. We aim for this entire session to take about 45 minutes and give you back a bit of time that you had in your diary. So we're going to spend about 30 minutes discussing the key topics on the agenda for 25, and then we'll have hopefully what will be a good discussion. So please feel free to speak up, opinions, questions, they're all welcome. So in the year ahead, I think we all know that it's going to be another year of uncertainty. And amidst all that talk, whether it's economic or whether it's political, I think there's one thing that we know that we can unfortunately bank on, and that is climate-driven disruption. The Earth's temperatures in 2024 unfortunately hit new milestones. They set all sorts of records nobody wanted to see set. And overall, we rose beyond the 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, which is a major target and factor for everybody who cares about sustainability and the future of nature, people, and our businesses. From deadly floods in China and Europe, in Africa, tropical storms across the Atlantic and Pacific and the regions that border those bodies of water, heat waves in India, droughts in South America. There wasn't really a region on the globe that was spared the impact of climate disruption. And some early research shows that the impact from a commercial perspective, as well as a humane perspective, was huge. The 10 costliest climate disasters in 2024 racked up more than $229 billion of damages and killed more than 2,000 people. And that figure is compiled based just on an analysis of insurance claims and the payouts related to them. It doesn't take into account issues such as losses in crop production. It doesn't take into consideration delays in trading, amongst many other impacts that these sort of events have. So that $229 billion really doesn't reflect the true financial toll of these events. And unfortunately, we are off to another flying start in 2025. The wildfires in LA are taking lives. They're causing the evacuation of more than 100,000 residents. And so far, it's destroyed more than 12,000 homes, businesses, and other structures such as schools. Over 45,000 individuals are employed in the garment industry in LA. It's the center of garment production in that country. The Port of Los Angeles is the biggest container port in North America. It handles 20% of the cargo that is imported into the US. And LA's GDP is $1.3 trillion, which is on a par with Spain and Mexico and is greater than countries such as Saudi Arabia, Netherlands, or Turkey. So whilst this sort of catastrophe is still live, the impact is going to be huge for individuals, for families, for communities across the greater LA region, but equally it is going to damage thousands of businesses directly and indirectly impacted by the event. So I would like to hope that everyone agrees with me that never has the case for sustainability been so strong for businesses. Business resilience is an absolute essential thing that every leader in an organization has to be taking seriously and taking action to build into their organizations. And yes, there is a near-term cost in every business transition, but the cost of inaction will be far greater if we don't start acting at a greater speed. So in the year ahead, we are really hopeful and we'll spend all of our time helping smart luxury businesses put a laser focus on the efforts that help them build resilience and help address other challenges they're facing, such as compliance, the value gap that's been created in luxury, erosion of consumer trust, and of course, talent attraction and retention. And that is what we are going to focus on talking about today. I'm joined with me in what we're calling a sort of fireside chat in our little boardroom in our offices in London by Beatrix Perks. Beatrix is our Associate Director of Client Success. She's got overall responsibility in our business for client relationships and the delivery of all our products and services. She brings a huge amount of expertise in carbon accounting and advising on carbon reduction strategies. She also gained a huge amount of experience in sustainable procurement, supplier engagement, and organizational change management while she was working previously at EcoVadis. She works with a diverse range of public and private sector clients, small and large organizations, and here at Positive Luxury, she has the great fortune of working with super cool businesses like Nelson-Bennett, Valextra, Tom Ford Beauty, M&M, Majuri, Rug Company, on and on and on. It's a tough gig for her. I'm also joined by Amelia Zager. She is a sustainability consultant here at Positive Luxury. She's been with the company for 3 years, progressing through various different roles. She's mainly focused on the big topic of supporting clients understand their environmental and social impact and the risks they face as businesses, identifying their material topics and challenges that they really need to address, and helping them define and deliver ESG strategies. She holds a variety of degrees. She's got an MBA Essentials from the London School of Economics, an MSc in Environment and Development from King's College London, and a BA in International Business Management from Hanze University in the Netherlands. Poor pronunciation. She's also got some hands-on practical business experience, which always helps her deliver good work for clients. She's worked in luxury hotels and in consumer brands globally, gained a lot of experience working in markets such as Spain, Mexico, and Cambodia, the Netherlands, and then here in the UK. And she speaks lots of different languages, including Latvian, English, and Spanish. So some really good international perspective to the work we do here. So let's, on that subject, talk about some elements that you wrote in the report, Amelia. In your summary of the sort of big issues for the luxury industry most broadly, you speak to businesses adopting an opportunity mindset. Yet I think we all know that, and what we're reading is that we're in the midst of what's being termed an ESG recession, which is again in the midst of a sort of economically turbulent period. What is going on?
Thank you, Amy, and hello, everyone. It's great to be here and share my thoughts. What's going on? Well, there's lots going on. Obviously, sustainability recession and an anti-ESG backlash definitely has been something that's been in the news a lot recently and the center to a lot of discussions. It was actually a Forbes article not so long ago, a couple of months ago, that said it's not an ESG recession, it's simply that it's graduating high school. And so what that means is that it represents a maturing of the sustainability field, and the need by companies to focus on material impacts that drive both financial and sustainability outcomes. And so what may be perceived as a decline in sustainability investment is actually evolving business sustainability agendas and businesses allocating their resources to priorities really and focusing down on what matters the most. The bottom line is that yes, we're not on track for 2030 and the ambitious targets and goals that businesses have set for themselves, but maybe the better question to ask ourselves is, are we even on the right track, really? And so businesses are now rethinking and maybe coming to the realization of the complexities of reaching these really, really ambitious targets that they set, 5 to 10 years ago. This is all fairly new still, is what we have to remember. And then, of course, there's the question of return on investment and ability to set accurate KPIs as part of their ESG and sustainability strategies. But what we're seeing and what we're discussing in the report as well is a shift in mindset from thinking about return on investment to thinking about cost of missed opportunity. So instead of thinking about what if I do this? What's my return if I do this? Instead, businesses are now thinking about what if I don't do this? And what if I don't pay any attention to this? What's going to happen to my business then? And technology plays a massive role in that. IT systems and AI technology has the potential to unlock a world of opportunity for complex data collection, to accurate environmental risk monitoring, adaptation to changing climates that will inevitably affect supply chains globally. It will also help with enhancing consumer experiences and boosting efficiency and make it easier for businesses to better use that sustainability investment and allocate it accurately. Just a couple of examples from some industries and verticals that we work with, such as jewelry and travel. So in jewelry industry, the sector is adopting technology for things like virtual try-ons, AI-powered customization, and blockchain technology to meet the demand for transparency. We're going to talk about it later, but transparency, of course, remains a huge area of priority when talking about supply chains. Meanwhile, the travel sector is unlocking the power of smart technology for sustainable management of energy, water, adopting AI solutions to reducing and managing waste efficiently, and even AI predictive analysis to improve procurement practices, all of which are considered highly material topics for the hospitality sector. And so one topic that would be considered most material or very highly material for almost every vertical or every industry is sourcing. And with that, I would like to move on to B now, and pose a question about supply chain. So B, you and your teams are working with clients day in and day out, and we hear you talking more and more about resilience, in particular supply chain resilience. What's happened? Why has this suddenly become so much more important?
Thanks, Amelia, and thanks, Amy. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. It certainly is something that's coming up more and more. It definitely is a real kind of critical focus for our clients. As Amy kind of mentioned, there's been various disruptions over the last few years, and they're definitely, we're seeing an increase in those environmental disruptions, but also geopolitical tensions and things like that, which affect our supply chains as well. So, here at Positive Luxury, we encourage our clients to build as resilient supply chains as possible to try and kind of withstand any of those disruptions within, across the globe, but also make sure that they're aligning with their overall company sustainability goals as well. The kind of cost of inaction has been mentioned, and this is particularly important within, businesses' supply chains. So failing to kind of address supply chain vulnerabilities really can lead to many negative outcomes. operational disruptions, increased costs, a loss of consumer trust as well, which all in all, combining that together, can lead to overall business failure. Have someone who's not on mute.
There they go. They've got the mute.
Perfect.
We're good.
So it's really important to actually understand what is going on within your own supply chain and how your suppliers are operating in their own organizations. So it's really important to map out, where do your suppliers sit across the globe? Where are those risks sitting? Where are those opportunities sitting? And without understanding those factors, you're really exposing yourself to various risks. So human rights and labour rights controversies. We've seen many of these, unfortunately, over the past few kind of months and years. And there's definitely more exposure, more interest in those issues, which is great. It's good for the consumers and for the market to know about, but obviously we have to be tackling them. Obviously has, not only from a kind of moral standpoint, but it impacts your brand in terms of your reputation. There may also be kind of legislative impacts as well, or implications. So really, really important to understand, your supply chain and what's going on there. We have a good example, I'd say, one way of looking at supply chain resilience is our client Cecily Banson. So I think they're a pretty good example of a business who are able to have that visibility within their supply chain. And the way that they are doing this is a lot of their suppliers are very localized. So they've predominantly based their suppliers within Europe, and they themselves are based in Europe. This allows them to have a really deep understanding of their suppliers, what actions they're taking from a kind of environmental point of view, but also ethical and a social point of view as well. So it gives them the opportunity to see, where can they work more closely with certain suppliers? Is there an opportunity for them to deepen those relationships, to innovate with suppliers, to transition perhaps even towards more what people are calling sustainable materials. So, materials that are perhaps certified versus those that are uncertified. So without this understanding of who their suppliers are and these close relationships, they wouldn't be able to have those conversations to the level that they do. Also, I suppose, having a more localized supply chain can have some other positive impacts. So lead times, I know this is definitely something that's also coming up from our clients, that they're seeing lead times going up and up. So by having a more localized supply chain, you're potentially reducing your risks there from that kind of delivery point of view. I think it's worth mentioning that almost kind of on the flip side, there's an opportunity for businesses to diversify from a geographical point of view, to then potentially minimize certain localized disruptions. So I know that can seem almost kind of contradictory to each other, but I think it's important to understand your own business, where, what type of suppliers you're working with, and whether there are opportunities or benefits by being more localized or more diversified. Obviously, Amy's mentioned, earlier the really horrific wildfires within LA and some of the flooding and things like that that's been going on in the last few months and years. And I think for all of us as individuals, but from a business point of view, it's a really stark kind of reminder of how fragile our environment really is. And so understanding these risk factors at a really granular and location specific point of view is really important. Are my suppliers at risk from a water scarcity point of view? Are my suppliers potentially at risk from a kind of political instability angle? And what action can we take as an organisation to protect ourselves? Amelia's mentioned AI and tech tools. I think definitely that's an area where these kind of tools will become more crucial as we move through this year and beyond, to look at and identify where some of those disruptions might be. So looking at historical data, looking at the geopolitical landscape and weather patterns and things like that will be very, very useful. But before tech becomes something that everyone is using in their business, I think the kind of first step that organizations need to take is really the groundwork of understanding your own network and how your suppliers interact with each other. I think finally, just to kind of, I mentioned it a little bit earlier around this kind of consumer and stakeholder angle. So increasingly, we're seeing that more and more brands are being held accountable for their entire value chain by their consumers and by their stakeholders, which I think is a great thing. It's a very positive thing that, you know, consumers are trying to understand more about who they're purchasing from and the action that those businesses are taking. I read a statistic the other day. It's around 75% of Gen Z say that they value sustainability over brand names when they're making those purchasing decisions. So I think that's particularly, unfortunately, within the luxury sector. I think, you know, over the last X number of years, some businesses have kind of ridden off their brand name and thinking, oh, well, you know, we've been around for a huge number of years. We kind of ride off that reputation. But actually, the new generation who are coming in, who are going to be, you know, with their new spending power, I think it's really important to tailor and understand who those consumers are and the action that they are looking for organizations to take. So lots to kind of digest and lots to think about from a supply chain resilience point of view. It's definitely not a topic that's going away. And, you know, if you want to be a successful brand for a long time and have that kind of trust and consumer, you know, have that brand awareness and brand reputation maintained, it's really an area that all organizations have to look into.
Agree.
So I'm actually going to pass it back to Amy. We obviously have spoken about resilience there, but for most kind of luxury businesses, they're talking about a difficult economic environment in 2025.
For sure.
Which, you know, we've obviously seen that in 2024 as well. How would you be kind of approaching this if you were still running a luxury business, luxury brand?
Yeah, I mean, it's so I mean, maybe my timing to cross the fence and turn gamekeeper turn poacher was well timed. But I mean, okay, so let's be honest, we all know the forecasts for luxury growth stand at low single digits. You know, if you're my age, you've led businesses through a time when you could just ride the tide of a boom cycle and grow along that, and you were really just trying to keep up. It was a really volume-based focus that you took as a business leader. Right, last year and this year we're in a contraction phase. So as a business leader, what you're really doing is fighting for your share in a market that overall is not going to see growth. So how can you be stronger than the competition, and how can you minimize risks that could prevent you from standing apart from and above the competition? That contraction's, in my view, being driven by two key factors. We all talk about macro conditions driving it, and there is absolutely no doubt that is a big part of it. But I believe there is an extraordinary value gap that has really developed over the last few years, probably post-pandemic in luxury, as price increases, the sort of post-pandemic purchasing boom when we all, you know, went on sort of revenge spending, gave us confidence as luxury brands to raise prices. Suddenly, when we start to question that and those price rises get publicized and that starts to gain traction in the press, that it creates this gap. Why am I paying that much more for the same product? And is that product really the same quality it was when it was 75% of the price, 60% of the price, sometimes 40% of the price it is now? There's only one of these two things that we as CEOs can control. We can't change the bigger world, particularly those of us who are working in SMEs or independent businesses, but we can try to bridge that gap. So as a CEO, the first thing is, what can I control? What can we influence? I'd then be asking myself and my leadership team, all right, how do we bridge that gap? That we can do something about. We built the gap. Now let's close the gap. How do we do that? And how do we, as part of that, make our business, our P&L, our balance sheets, our people more productive? How do we ensure that we've got all the sort of, I guess, rigorous financial controls that very pragmatically we have to have in place, but how do we make sure that they're not rigid, and that we are listing the wrong items under what I would call discretionary spend? When we're making tough choices, are we being careful or pulling back in the right areas? And I think we'll only find the answers to those questions by going back to the real foundations of our businesses, of what we are as a luxury business, of our individual brand and the products that we create or the services we provide, and our business model. Is the business model on which we were founded, is that right for now? Is it right for the future? Are we missing opportunities? And I think we have to challenge ourselves I think we just move the same old pieces around the board. And we need to be a little bit more revolutionary, may be too much, but I think we've got to jump off the treadmill. Every business challenge, and these are certainly challenging times, if you view it through the right lens, is an opportunity. And in my view, taking an optimistic view like that, and optimism and resilience, they're bedfellows. They go hand in hand. So the opportunity during a contraction is to drop. I would call it a slow down to go fast approach, to use a cliche, to move your business's focus away from a volume-led mindset of doing more, and unfortunately, probably more of the same, creatively speaking, to a quality-led mindset. It's the luxury has, and we should be utilizing it. Less demand means there is time for us to build a more substantive vision of the future and a more efficient vision for the future. Our businesses are crawling all over with inefficiencies, and I know that from experience. There's a huge number of things that we did and I championed and loved doing that were wasteful or inefficient, or it was easier to just rise the tide of something that was well entrenched and not push back. I think it's time to really recalibrate and be creative, and for very practical climatic reasons, and to protect the sort of natural resources and the human skills on which the luxury industry in particular depends. Our business model depends on it. Our pricing depends on it. Sustainability has to be central to that sort of simplified, re-energized, truly creative vision. And if I didn't include that, I would consider myself as a leader right now to be remiss in my duties, because I would place my business at serious risk in the near term by not placing that transition that we need to make as business leaders in the top of the agenda. So, if you're looking at the year ahead, be making choices based on, I guess, and prioritizing actions that deliver what I would call in my old retailer head, 4 for the price of 1. Is it giving your business climate resilience? Is it helping you with regulatory compliance? Is it providing you cost savings? A lot of things you can do within the world of sustainability will make your business more efficient and less costly. And are those activities helping you rebuild credibility with consumers? And are they helping you strengthen your relationship with your workforce? And if it ticks all 4 of those boxes, you should be doing it. And if it doesn't, you really need to challenge yourself to maybe set some sacred cows on fire and redo the priority list. That's the approach I would take, but I like to blow things up and rebuild them. So, that's why I've made a career out of doing it, because I think it's how businesses have to be reinventing themselves to the right degree. And this is a time for all of us as leaders to be genuinely rethinking the vision of our businesses for the future. Amelia, I talked there a bit about protecting the resources, and in particular the natural resources that I think luxury has a sort of disproportionate overdependency on because of how we make our products. In the briefing, you state that you think biodiversity is finally going to come out from the shadows this year and get its moment in the sun, which would be wonderful to see from my personal perspective. Why do you think that, and where are there opportunities for luxury brands to focus on that topic, but also benefit their businesses?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely no shortage of opportunities, and there's also no shortage of risk. The truth be told, as everyone knows, climate and carbon has for a very long time dominated the environmental discussion, and to a large extent that's because of ease of measurements and comparability, whereas biodiversity is not as straightforward, it's much more dynamic and complex. But so where is this coming from? The focus on biodiversity has come from many different angles, really. Firstly, businesses are recognizing the ecological and economic value of biodiversity. So it's not just thinking about what is your impact on nature and biodiversity, but it's thinking about what's your dependency on biodiversity and what, natural resources and ecosystem services you need to be able to deliver, to create your product and deliver your service. Meanwhile, of course, legislative frameworks like TNFD and CSRD are driving integration of nature-related risk disclosure into company reporting. This will also then drive the consistency and comparability that we've seen in the climate space. And thirdly, even the ever-present well-being trend is very closely linked to biodiversity, emphasizing the interdependence of personal health, societal welfare, and planetary well-being. And so undoubtedly, nature will become the core of business strategy this year and moving forwards. The opportunities, on the other hand, there's like I said, there's many, to name a few. Innovation represents a huge opportunity in using biotech and eco-design principles in product development, using new and innovative materials and reducing that reliance on virgin materials, looking to replace them with more sustainable alternatives and reducing the pressure and dependence on nature and natural resources. Circularity plays a huge role in luxury, given the product quality, durability, and longevity. So a product or its parts, the life cycle of its parts, or the whole piece together, can be extended through repair and resale. And then engaging in conservation initiatives and projects to protect and regenerate resources that the business depends on and needs to continue to deliver its product and service to the consumer, like I mentioned. And so from investment in regenerative agriculture to restore ecosystems and enhance soil health, which is going to be crucial for drinks industry, to destination stewardship and destination biodiversity restoration in luxury travel, and switching to recycled and lab-grown materials and jewelry. In every industry, in every vertical, there's ways to think about innovation and circularity. And like we've said before, luxury is really leading the way. The last thing that I'll mention is that, quite interestingly, what we have seen is quite a switch in attitude from reactive to active when it comes to biodiversity. And so what businesses are starting to look at is conservation and preservation of nature and biodiversity, instead of just focusing on regeneration of nature that has already been heavily affected by people, by businesses. And for businesses, this will also mean lower risk when it comes to the cost of nature restoration and reputational damage as well, like we mentioned earlier. And so with that, I turn to you, B, again. And so I briefly touched on legislation and how that's driving biodiversity in a lot of different ways. Last year, we saw an unfortunate side effect with sustainability legislation, and that is the rise of greenwashing. Yet in 2025, transparency and traceability are going to be front and center. So what's going on there?
Yeah, it's a good question. Again, and we certainly, unfortunately, did see a rise in greenwashing. Just for those of you who might not be familiar with the term, it is being bounced around a lot more often, but just as a reminder, this is where brands are deliberately downplaying or avoiding communicating about their sustainability efforts. So, they may be taking really great action internally, but they're just not talking about it. So, yeah, as Amelia said, this really has kind of emerged as a side effect of increasing sustainability legislation. And it's often kind of driven by this fear of consumer scrutiny. So I mentioned earlier about consumers taking more of an interest in what organizations are doing, but then they're, fearful of scrutiny from them or being accused of greenwashing. Yeah. And, we, as I'm sure many of you are aware, we have had several kind of well-known brands in the past I think six to 12 months. H&M, as an example, they've actually faced fines for making false or misleading sustainability statements. So it's not just that they're going to point fingers and point some blame, but there's actually, financial implications to these things. And actually, I was reading earlier in September last year, the UK advertising watchdog wrote to 17, they haven't named who they are, but 17 well-known fashion brands, advising them on, that they need to go and review how they're marketing their sustainability claims. So a lot more action is being taken proactively to, prevent businesses from greenwashing, and therefore that's where we're seeing a lot of people going the other way. I think, so that obviously contributes to why we'll see transparency and traceability as a more central kind of priority. And it links in obviously with what I said earlier about, understanding your suppliers. There's various regulation coming in. So around the need for digital product passports or DPPs in certain industries. Fashion is a particularly kind of hot sector that will have to provide greater information. So provide this information for their consumers. It is possible that this will come into effect for other industries or other sectors as well. Beauty, for example, demanding greater transparency around where their ingredients are sourced from.
Yep.
So, these things they're building traction, and they may well then spread out into other sectors. So it's good to be aware of what's going on in your own sector, but also outside of it as well. Gaining transparency can be quite challenging for particularly, I think Amelia mentioned earlier, around the kind of jewelry industry, beauty industry, where, those supply chains often stretch across really, really complex global kind of networks. And it is a challenge. But, sadly, there's been various kind of health and safety controversies, particularly in the jewelry industry, obviously in the kind of mining aspect of things, and this really does reinforce the need for transparency. It's not, it is not optional anymore. It really is critical to make sure that you're protecting both the human rights, but also your brand reputation as a whole. There's more demand for this data on kind of sourcing practices, labor conditions, environmental impact. And the demand is kind of pushing those brands beyond what we call almost the grey zone of vague claims and incomplete disclosure to more substantiated information. And we have seen, particularly in the beauty sector, there's a growing trend of consumers searching for the term sustainable beauty. So there's clearly a demand for that. And we've seen that around 40% of green claims are made by firms who kind of the claims are then deemed to be potentially misleading. So 40% of those claims, which is not good. So it's really important to be substantiating that information that you're putting out there in the world.
Yeah.
I'd just like to highlight one of our clients, Monica Vinader.
Yep.
They really are kind of leading the way
Yeah.
in traceability within their supply chain. And they're obviously within the jewelry industry, so an area that I said was quite challenging. So they've worked incredibly hard to understand their complex supply chain, and they're actually embracing technology. So this is something that was also mentioned earlier in other conversations, that technology is really going to help drive these topics. So look at what is out there in your particular sector, in your market, what you can harness. We obviously here at Positive Lecture, we emphasize that need for authentic transparency, and the fact that it's not just about avoiding risk, but it's an opportunity for you as an organization to really lead with integrity and to really show that you are committed to those ethical practices as an organization, but ultimately that you're protecting and future-proofing your own brand reputation. We're not here to say that, we don't want you guys as organizations to exist on the planet. We need to make sure that you're just, performing and acting in the right way as organizations. Maybe just one thing to kind of finally wrap things up. I read somewhere that 71% of consumers have indicated that traceability is very important to them, and they're even willing to pay a premium for brands who provide that traceability. So leave that one with you guys, something to certainly think about, and hopefully a lot of food for thought on what we've discussed today.
Yeah, and I think an important takeaway before we go to Q&A from what you're saying, Bea, I would hark back for anybody who attended our autumn open house. We had some great panelists, including Deb Caldo from Diageo, and we were talking about the intention gap, which is what we often hear from brands, which is we're not going to put time and effort into this, or we're not doing it because the intention gap exists. Of course it does, but we don't help it by not communicating our efforts effectively and in a way that's clear and concise and accurate, but also sexy and compelling and aspirational and interesting. So Deb in that panel said it may not be the prime deciding factor, but it is certainly a tiebreaker. And there's lots of evidence to support the rise in online research about ethics and values and sustainability efforts. So I wouldn't underestimate the way that communication and good communication could be a real asset for your business. I can see a couple questions, so I'm going to bring those up because we promised we wouldn't take up the whole hour. So question number one. What are the conditions under which luxury and sustainability can best reciprocate and eventually strengthen one another? Would you like me to answer that and give my view, or would one of you like to answer
Take it away, Amy.
Yeah, I mean, the reason Positive Luxury was founded is because we believed luxury had a sort of outsized ability to influence and drive positive change. Luxury sets trends. They make what's fashionable fashionable. Our ability as an industry to make conscious purchasing, to make truly high quality products, to try to drive growth off of value rather than volume, to adopt circularity methods and business models that help us keep clients with our brands. Those are things that can make sustainability, again, for lack of a better word, the new black. They can make that attractive. They can make it fashionable, essential for businesses to be modern, to be cool, to be attractive. And I think that's where luxury and sustainability can really meet. Only luxury can really build on a model that isn't all about high volume, low price. That gives us a completely unique opportunity to strengthen our businesses, but also improve the way that businesses interact with nature and people that are part of our value chains. So that's my view on that, which means one of you guys have got to answer the next question, which is, how much do you feel the responsibility for improving ESG practices lies with private businesses versus government? What do you think?
Well, it's everyone's responsibility at the end, isn't it? But there has to be frameworks. There has to be, for businesses are looking up to someone to provide the framework and work against some kind of common strategy, I guess, for lack of a better word, policy, that is global, that is, like I mentioned earlier, comparable. That's why carbon was something that's, not to say it's easy. The data collection is nowhere near easy for all of you who have attempted a carbon assessment and are working towards your SBTI targets potentially for 2030. But there does need to be some kind of framework coming from above for businesses to be able to follow, and for business to be able to compare, and that's also what's going to help drive and encourage the investments, because if investors cannot have that comparability and understand, okay, what does it all mean? Everyone comes up with different frameworks. What can I trust? Then sustainability, and what we talked about, AI and innovation, that's not going to be possible without the green investment. So it is all interconnected. It is at the end also, it's our as consumers responsibility to be sustainable, but I cannot be 100% sustainable if the product, if the brands that I purchase from haven't designed products that are sustainable. So it is there's a lot of moving parts to this, but it does have to trickle down, I feel.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, there's obviously various regulation that is in place or coming into place, and only certain businesses above a certain threshold may be, bound to these regulations. But CSRD, for example, there's a guidance or framework for SMEs who may not be at the moment kind of bound to that regulation. So yes, you may not have to report on certain things, but we would recommend start early, and it allows you then to be prepared for when you may be kind of bound to those regulations.
Definitely. And it does take time to prepare for all that. And even if you're not directly affected today, maybe the business that you are supplying to or working with is affected by now. So you're actually indirectly affected because your business partner somewhere else is having to report against these frameworks, and so they need information from you, and they need for you to have strategy and targets and so on and so forth. It trickles down. It trickles all the way down. That's why knowing what's happening in your supply chain, communication, transparency, it's without having close relationship, collaboration with your suppliers, brands cannot achieve absolutely anything.
Yeah. One step at a time, one supplier at a time, but it's possible. And we've seen lots of businesses who they haven't done it overnight, but they've started one brand at a time, and they're getting there, and they're making progress. So it is feasible. You just have to have the desire and the patience, and you have to prioritize it. And I think we haven't had any other questions, have we, Nat? No. So that would be our closing advice, which is just keep moving forward. Make sure that you are looking after your businesses today and tomorrow, and making sure that we all have the resources used effectively that we need in the future. Thank you very, very much, everyone, for giving up your time and for joining us today. Don't forget to download the report that Natalie has posted in the chat. It will also be published tomorrow publicly. So you can also go to our website and download it at any point in time. If you have any questions afterwards, if you need any help, you want some advice, anything like that, we are here to support the industry and help us make a more positive impact and make sure that we have a future as an industry. So anything you need, just get in touch. We're always here to help, and have a fabulous rest of your day and a great 25.